Hello, everybody. I'm Michael from Hype's marketing team, and today I'm supporting Sandra, our head of sustainability and social impact at Hype, with her presentation on how sustainability goals are a natural driver for innovation management. Just a few housekeeping things. So immediately after the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session to answer all your questions, and probably to answer the two important questions right away. You will receive a link to the recording, and you will receive the slides. And as well, you will receive a playbook that tells you why innovation or corporate innovation and sustainability initiatives are natural allies. But without further ado, I'll hand this over to Sandra.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm really happy to see all of you guys. Welcome to the session. As Mitch said, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We are going to try to answer all your questions in the session today. But if for whatever reason that's not possible, if you have too many questions, it takes too long, then we will follow up with an email. So don't worry, we're going to try our best to answer all your questions. So yeah, today let's talk about sustainability and innovation and how those two are linked and why. So first of all, just a bit of an introduction. Who am I? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Hype's head of sustainability and social impact. That means that I help a lot of our clients to innovate for sustainability. So initiatives for ecological sustainability or social sustainability, all of these things are there. And I know that some of you in the audience have had quite a bit of interaction with me. So yeah, really happy to see all of you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly in all the ways that you see here displayed on the screen. Now, let's take a bit of a step back. I know that sustainability is like this huge buzzword and everybody's talking about it. But I went to an innovation conference lately and I discovered that there's a lot of organizations who kind of address it because they have to or they feel like they have to. But there's like real reasons why we do that. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of the idealistic side. Let's put that first, but then also like the business drivers behind it before we go into different pieces of how you can do it very hands-on. So in 2010, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development got together and they published a vision. So they published a vision for 2050, and that vision is for around 9 billion people to live well within the boundaries of the planet. So that means that we as a species, as humankind, can all have a good life, within the boundaries of this one planet that we have. So that's kind of the vision. And what that means is that we can measure it in two different ways. So what you can see here is that we have the Human Development Index on one axis, and then the number of Earths, so how many planets do we need on the other axis. And basically what that means is the Human Development Index is how well do we live, how much poverty is there, are people being educated, etc. So all of these things. And the number of Earths, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. If we all lived the way that we do, how many planets do we need just in terms of resources? Now, the place where we want to be is this one. So we want every person on this planet to live a good life, but within the boundaries of this one Earth. And you can see that there's like these different countries displayed here. And so what we often see is that the more developed world is more in the quadrant where we see that we need a lot of Earths, very developed, but we just like totally exceed the boundaries of the planet. Whereas a lot of the global South tends to be, not using that many Earths, but the Human Development Index is just not as high as we would want it to be. So if you put on your innovation hat, which I'm sure you're very used to, that means that we have to transform in completely different ways. So the countries that are using a lot of Earths need to reduce that, but the others need to, up their game when it comes to the Human Development Index. So we all have to travel in different directions, and that's why there's no one solution fits all. Like it's not a one size fits all problem, but we have to move in different ways. Now, organizations go beyond country boundaries. So what we can see here is that a lot of you guys are acting as global players. And so you can have an influence on all of these different countries and all of these different developments. So that's kind of like where you can place yourself in here. Now, how do we get there? we went from business as usual, 2010, that's kind of like the baseline, and we're envisioning the sustainable world in 2050. Okay, and the method that we use for that is called backcasting. So basically we start at the top, we define what the bottom is, and then we see, okay, what is the gap? What do we need to close? So it's kind of like a roadmap to get there. And so right now you can see that we are kind of like in those turbulent teens to 2020. We've kind of like started exceeding that now, but now it's transformation time, okay? So now we need to really make sure that we're following this. And one way to get there, so kind of like a milestone in between, are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I know that's another big buzzword, so that's why I wanted to bring it up today, SDGs. A lot of different companies talk about them. A lot of the world talks about them, but oftentimes I'm still asked, Sandra, what are the SDGs? So I wanted to show them to you here today. These are essential in reaching the 2050 goals, okay? So it's kind of like halfway there. And as an organization, you would choose different ones. So it's not a Pokemon game. It's not a, gotta catch them all situation. It's more a situation of where you think, what is my core business? Where can I affect the most change? So me as a Hype representative, for us, for example, SDG 9 is our core business, right? We are in innovation. We provide infrastructure in the form of software so that people can innovate. So that is like what our product is really contributing to. And then we have a couple of others that we are contributing to because we choose to do so, goal 8 and 5 and 17. But for your organization, that might be completely different. So let me just interact with you right away because I want to make sure that you also get to voice some things. So I'm going to launch this poll. Please tell me, has your organization already chosen specific SDGs that you are looking to contribute to? So that should be showing up on your screen right now. So please go ahead and just vote. I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds, not minutes here. And it's completely fine if you don't know. That's what we're here for. So I'm just curious to see because, like I said, SDGs tends to be this big buzzword, but not everybody is following them or is, already in touch with them. Okay, so I'm still seeing people contributing. That's great, thank you. Okay, perfect. So let's put a pin in that now. So 80% of you guys, and I can show you that, 80% are saying yes, which is a great result. And 20% of you are saying that you don't know, which is completely fine. Just as a tip for you, I'm sure your organization publishes a sustainability report. And if they do, then that should show up there. And as we go through today's webinar, the SDGs are constantly going to accompany us. So that's why I kind of wanted to do a first introduction of what they even are. Okay, so the SDGs, those are going to get us to 2030. They work across countries. They have an effect everywhere where we are. But of course, I am very aware that this is an idealistic approach right now, right? Just because the world wants to live in the boundaries of one planet, what does that have to do with my organization, right? We are driven by profit. We're not necessarily driven by idealism. And I get that. There's a whole bunch of other reasons of why you should be innovating for sustainability. Now, when we take a look at that, yes, we want to be, good global players. We want to have a positive impact on the people and the planet. So that is an idealistic reason right there. But what we're seeing, for example, also is that we tend to get pressure from our customers, and there's a reputational impact that goes with that. So, for example, 92% of consumers say that they're more likely to trust brands that are environmentally or socially conscious. And even 88% of consumers are going to be more loyal to a company that supports these issues. So this has a direct impact on how you are perceived as a brand. And there's a lot of money in this. So if we go to that next point, the commercial sustainability of your business, I don't know if you read Larry Fink, so the CEO of BlackRock's CEO, the annual CEO letter this year, but in it, he published that right now, sustainable investments have reached $4 trillion. So there is a lot of money in this business. So this is really something that you can make money with. We also face changes in regulation, right? We see CO2 taxes coming up. We see that, for example, in Germany now there's like a new supply chain law that is going to be introduced next year or the year after, depending on how big your organization is. So that is going to have a huge effect on your business as well, kind of like pushing you to take these steps. Of course, there are risks from extreme events, business disruptions. So we're seeing that reinsurance companies, for example, are really putting a lot of money into prevention and these kinds of cases because they see an investment risk when it comes to business disruptions. And we saw that with COVID. So COVID is something that completely goes with sustainability. And what we also see is that it's easier to acquire talent and also to keep talent if you are perceived as a sustainable organization. So for example, 64% of millennials say that they're willing to turn down a job if the company does not have a strong corporate responsibility. So that might be some of the best people that you would want to hire now. They don't want to work for you if you don't invest into this area. And so this is just something, some of these points that are really, really important to keep in mind here when we take that into consideration. Now, what we can see is that sustainability is this huge challenge, right? It's a big mountain that kind of comes up in front of us. It needs transformation. So we need to transform the way that we do business, the way that we think about things. And in order to do that, transformation means innovation. And transformation needs you guys. It needs innovation managers. So in order to get there, that is what we have to do. And so I can only encourage you to become really good friends with your sustainability teams, because together you can tackle these challenges really well. And sustainability also drives your business because of like all the reasons that I just showed you. So at one point or another, I am assuming that this is something that could show up on your plate. So let me ask you directly, are sustainability challenges currently a part of your job as an innovation manager? So I'm just launching this next poll here, if you could be so kind and answer that. Okay, so a couple of answers are already here. Still going to give you a little bit of time. All right. Okay, so if you haven't clicked yet, please click now. All right, and we're going to stop this poll. So what we're seeing, and I'm going to share the result with you, is that 89% of you, so really the grand majority, is already facing sustainability challenges as a part of your job. So it's already arrived with you. And 11% of you say that that's not the case yet. And we'll see, maybe it's not going to arrive with your organization, but I'm pretty convinced that it will. So let me show you what sustainability means for innovation. Like what kinds of challenges could we be facing here? And of course, how can we solve them? So it's a transformation challenge, like I said. So this is really what we're facing here. And often we see that you have to go through a transformation to become sustainable, but oftentimes your programs are not yet addressing, the full spectrum of everything that we would need, or they might be limited in scale. But that's something, of course, that we can ramp up. So what are some of the things that you could be looking at here? Now, one of the things is that there's so much going on in the world, right? So we need to take a look at trends. We need to take a look at technologies. What are competitors doing? What are opportunities? So this is really where we can take sustainability as an opportunity. We can turn around our business and we can, become better than our competitors if we manage to have a good look out on the world, see what's happening, incorporate that into our strategy, and then actually go ahead and execute it. So that's one piece of it. Now, we also see that existing offerings, so that can be products and services, you need to redefine them, okay? So you need to see how do we have to adjust them? What can we do with them? Sometimes you need to create new things. Sometimes you might need to create completely new business models. So it can be anything from very incremental innovation where you're optimizing, right? You're reducing your energy consumption, you're doing these kinds of things, but it can also be completely radical where you say, okay, this is something that changes the complete system, this changes everything that I do. It is on the entire spectrum of that. And oftentimes we see that sustainability challenges tend to be rather on the strategic innovation to radical innovation side, rather than just the incremental innovation. But all of these are needed. Now, it's great if we start as us, our own organization, but we're not alone in this globalized world. So we really need to see what is happening in our value chain, across our value chain, what is happening, before us, after us, what is the perception, what is everybody doing? Do we have to address, some laws? Like I mentioned, the supply chain law that is going to be introduced in Germany. So all of these different aspects need to be assessed. And oftentimes you will need to include these environmental and social and governance criteria now, ESG criteria, which is another one of these big buzzwords when we talk about sustainability. Now, of course, we need to keep the business intact, right? We need to keep going, but we still have to transform at the same time. So we have to make sure that we are aware of our portfolio, we know our pipeline, we can make these decisions based on different criteria. But the decision-making needs to change. So what we did before was that often we said, okay, how much money is this going to bring us or save us, right? Saving times, doing all these different things. Now we're moving to a different way of measuring that is more across the triple bottom line and not so much just the bottom line. So all of a sudden now we're not just doing profit or prosperity, we are also doing people and planet. And that, of course, makes things a lot more complex. And it means that we have conflict situations, it means that we have to compromise for certain things. So it doesn't make the whole thing easier. And that's what's a little bit unfortunate about sustainability, is that it really raises the complexity rather than reducing it. But it's not impossible to do, because we need to include the right people in here. So when we include the right stakeholders, and you saw that this is kind of like a challenge across all different aspects of your business, then these people can help you. So what you need to do is be quick and have the right people on board. So have the right stakeholders on board. And you can see some of these examples right here on the screen now. I'm not going to read them all out to you. Customers play an important role. Employees, of course, play a super important role, but also going beyond your organization. So suppliers, academia, all of these different people that can help you with it. And then it's a question of managing at the right time, pulling them in when you need them, getting their knowledge and making progress with them. But just, so sustainability, just like innovation in general, is a lot of stakeholder management. It's a lot of the right people at the right time. Now let's start at the beginning. How do we get these people involved? Like, what do I need to do? Strategy. That is where we start first. Now, sometimes I'm being told, oh, well, we have a corporate strategy and then we have a sustainability strategy. But these two don't relate, but they do. So this is kind of like how they can relate, okay? So you see every time that something, we want to grow, we want to be more efficient, we have these very money-oriented goals, but we also want to be sustainable and we want to have that social impact. And so now what we can do is we can marry them up, right? Sometimes we have cost reduction goals, for example. Guess what? We also have waste reduction or energy reduction or CO2 reduction, these kinds of goals. Oftentimes, they can go together really, really well. And you can define your goals, what exactly you want to achieve with that, by saying something like, okay, we want to reduce our costs, we want to reduce our CO2 emissions, so we want to go carbon neutral, which is one of these things, which also, by the way, Hype is doing right now for ourselves. But you also have these growth goals. And if you introduce sustainable products, there's a lot of consumers out there who are willing to pay up to 20% more to get a sustainable product rather than a non-sustainable product, at least when it comes to the B2C market. So these are some of the things of like how you can really marry them up if you put your strategy together. And for those of you who are not as familiar with your sustainability reports, with your sustainability teams, go ahead and take a look at them. Many of the initiatives that you will see there can be combined with corporate goals, with corporate strategy. So sustainability and also an innovation strategy do not have to be or should not be separate. They should be really integrated. They should be working together. And then how do you get there? Like, what do you need to do? Building a roadmap. That is like the first step, as always. What do we want to do? When do we want to do that? So what's the direction of travel? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? You know, that's, and you're used to doing that. That's exactly the same as an innovation strategy. So it works the exact same way. Break it into phases so that you're not overwhelmed, but do milestones, see how you can get there. Now, you're not always going to have the same roadmap, okay? So all of your organizations are going to be different in what you need to achieve and what you've already achieved. And so there's different steps to take. So there's always this conflict. You have your existing business, you need to keep going, and you need to be profitable, because if you're not profitable, you can't affect any change. So you need to keep that going, but on the other side, you also need to transform. But you know how to do that. You're innovation managers, so that's something that you do on an everyday basis, right? Sustainability works exactly the same. It's just a different problem that we're tackling. And then we get this pressure. We need to see what capacity we have. You know, we have competitive pressure, but all of these things are not new to you. So it's just a different lens. It's a sustainability lens, but the way that we work with it is the same as we would work with strategic or radical innovation. And then, of course, we need to do that in different cycles, okay? So, of course, it's not all done at once. If you were a glass manufacturer, you don't go carbon neutral in a year. It's just not possible. So we're adjusting, we're going, we're transforming. To give you some example, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit of an overwhelming slide. These are some key pillars that you could take a look at, and they could connect to certain SDGs in this way. So you might want to, you want to start off with your sustainability strategy. So understanding trends, what is happening out there, etc. That's connected to specific SDGs that you can see here. But you also want to include your employees, you have your decision making, you have your customer engagement. So all of these things kind of can connect to different SDGs that your business will then contribute to. Your main task is to make sure that you're not just choosing random SDGs, but that these are actually the ones that are most meaningful for your business. And that means that they're at the core of the business, that you are actually changing something in the world by doing that. Now, what that could look like just to give you a little bit of a software outlook here, because of course, Hype, we provide software for you. This is an item of Hype Strategy, the module. It's called Roadmaps. And so this is just an example of how you can structure your carbon neutrality, right? It's made to be simple so that you can take a look at it here. So you might want to go through different phases, such as a data collection and a decarbonization action phase. And then you have your different time slots, when you want to achieve these things, targets that you want to achieve, etc. So this is a way of how the software could enable you to build these different roadmaps for different sustainability items and to innovate towards them. So that's kind of like a way of how you could do that. So now, let me ask you again, is sustainability an integral part of your innovation strategy at this moment? Please take some time to answer that question. Okay, so we have a lot of answers coming in, so thank you for that. Just going to give it a couple of seconds more. Okay, great, thank you. So 81% of you guys are saying, yes, it is an integral part of your innovation strategy. And I think that's great. That means that you have already made progress in that area, and that means that you're already more mature than other organizations. 14% of you guys are saying no, and that's completely fine. There's some industries who are ahead of the curve because they also have to be, because they're more regulated, for example, and so they have to take care of that, or it just plays a more important role because their management puts more emphasis on it. And 5% of you guys don't know, and that is completely fine. It's not always evident where sustainability starts and innovation stops, or like where they do the handshake. So thank you very much for answering this poll. Now, another piece of what I've been talking about here are trends. You know, you have to take a look at the world, what is happening out there, and then make decisions based on that. So this is an example of how you can build a trend radar in the software, also using Hype Strategy. And this one is just for sustainability overarchingly. And that is like something that you could use to do that here. And so one of the companies that did that is actually Velo. So Velo produced pumps. They're a German company. And what they did is they had this trend radar with 200 trends that were all related to their own sustainability goals. So what you can see here, bottom left, these are the SDGs that Velo contributes to. So because they're producing pumps, of course, clean water and sanitation is core business for them, right? So wherever they are in the world, they want to make sure that that is guaranteed. So this is something that they wanted to contribute to. So what Sven, the innovation manager, did last year was to team up with the sustainability team and to have May as a designated sustainability month. So that meant that every day they had something going on. So for example, a trend talk or an innovation cafe or keynotes from external speakers, experts, but also different companies that came in and just gave inspiration and interacted with the employees of Velo. Now, we have to say that Velo already, they won a bunch of prizes, for example, the German Sustainability Prize, which is very renowned. And so sustainability was already something that was important for them, but they really, really wanted to keep going there. So the trend radar was then used to also show management, but also the employees to really see, okay, what is relevant to our strategic sustainability innovation areas, and like, how does that play into our core business? Like, why is that not an add-on? Like, why do we need these new technologies? So they had a campaign kind of accompanying that sustainability month. And it was actually the most successful campaign that they had run in history, in their company history until that point. And they had about 150 ideas that came in, 10 that were shortlisted. And then there were pitches around it, and 4 ideas, well, 3 were actually selected for implementation, but a 4th one is also going to be implemented. And just so you can see how it connects to profit, so there's 2 ideas that are secret and they're IP relevant, so they're really going to transform the business. There's one that is about technology and innovation, and there's one that is about African women in tech, which that one is very people focused. It is not necessarily something what they make money with, but because of education and kind of developing the market, they're also like being a more attractive employer in that area, and also a more attractive company to buy from. So I brought you a citation from Sven, and I think he's even attending this webinar. So if you have any questions about that, you can read that out here. And so this is just a way of how you can connect, you know, your trends, your scouting out there, and then include your employees. So all employees were included in this challenge. But of course, this was something that was only internal. Now, I told you before, sustainability goes beyond the organization. We are so connected. So I brought you a little example of what that could look like to go beyond your own organization. Now, let's just put ourselves, you know, in the shoes of Unilever, who are there. So you have B2C, you have a B2C business, you have consumers that are buying from you, that are taking a look at what you're doing. And now Unilever actually puts a lot of emphasis on sustainability. So that's something that is very important to them, ecologically speaking, but also socially speaking. So what they also do is, for example, they innovate to have inclusive products, right? So for example, a deodorant that you can open with just one hand, where you don't need 2 hands to take off the cap. So that is something that they put in the market. But we're also taking a look at their value chain at this point. So Unilever, they make the product, right? But Maersk, those are the ones who actually transport the product. So that's how they are shipped to different places. Now, they use these ships and the engines of those ships. Those are made by Wärtsilä. And then you will have Infinium providing the lubricants for the engines of Wärtsilä. So you will see that this is like the entire value chain that goes along there. Now, for Unilever, it's quite easy to understand. Of course, they have consumers, you and I, who are saying, oh, but I want to buy from like a conscious company, and so I'm going to buy from them. Why should Infinium care about that? Because they're pushing it down the supply chain, okay? So at a certain point, they're going to say, well, we want to have a carbon neutral supply chain, for example. So then Maersk is going to freak out. They're going to put pressure on Wärtsilä. They're going to put pressure on Infinium. And all of a sudden, everybody's freaking out. Now, what Infinium is already doing today is they are already innovating to reduce the carbon emissions that the lubricant has on the engine. So for example, have lubricants that just last a lot longer so that engines don't break and like do all of these different things. So there is, wherever you are in the value chain, at some point, whether you're B2B or B2C, you will be hit by a sustainability request. For those that are doing B2C, it's usually a little faster, but B2B is really in there. And for all of you who are joining us from the chemistry industry right now, I mean, I'm sure that you can sing about 10,000 songs about this whole issue because you've been so regulated. So that is something to really keep in mind here. So it does affect all organizations at some point. The question is just when. And then what do you want to do? Do you want to follow, or do you want to be ready? Do you want to innovate proactively so that you can differentiate yourself? Or do you want to have to react and then be in a hurry and some competitors already ahead of time, right? That's kind of like the thoughts that we have in here. Same as for the packaging of Unilever products, for example. So Huhtamaki, they have the package that contains the product, but Stora Enso, they produce the raw materials for that. So they're really switching to paper and pulp and to do all these things to be more sustainable. So all of that kind of like puts together. Now, what you can do is you can be Mercedes and just tell your suppliers, listen, if you're not carbon neutral by 2040, you're out of the game. And then ThyssenKrupp freaks out and says, oh shit, okay, now I need to innovate for that. Or you can innovate collaboratively. And that's, for example, where Fujitsu comes into play. So Fujitsu is a system integrator with software and hardware. They have a network of over 200 partners, and they have included ESG criteria in their value chain. So their framework is called the Global Responsible Business, and they have 7 pillars to which partners are asked to contribute. So those pillars are well-being, community, environment, human rights, diversity and inclusion, occupational health and safety, compliance, and supply chain. So as a partner, you don't have to respond to all of these. The supply chain aspect has certain measurements that you have to comply with, but then they ask their partners, how can you help Fujitsu innovate so that we as a company are getting better in those pillars? So they're choosing a very collaborative approach, and it is something that is also essential for their own success. Because they work so closely with their partners, it is not like a supply chain, it is really more on one level, but they have to make sure that they keep them, included in there. So you have your supply chain aspect that is run by procurement, but actually some of their innovation managers take care of this more global responsible business framework, which is kind of like a subdivision in that case of the procurement part. But those are choosing a more collaborative approach. So they're not just like giving them, okay, here are all the requirements, fill them out, but they're really asking them, how can you help? What can you do? And then doing innovation initiatives together to make sure that this is really working. So before I go a little bit further, I am going to ask you the next question. Are you currently working on your sustainability efforts beyond your organization? So something like what Fujitsu is doing, is that something that you are also doing? Are you innovating for sustainability beyond? So are you doing open innovation for that? And I know that's quite a specific question, so please don't feel bad if you don't know the answer to that. Okay, we still have some answers coming in, so thank you for participating. All right. Great. So let me show you the results. 63% of you guys are saying yes. That's amazing. That's really great. 9% are saying no. That's actually the answer that I was expecting a little bit more. And 19% of you don't know, and that's completely normal. Like sometimes we just don't know all the things that are happening across the organization. So thank you so much for participating in this. I think that's a really interesting result. Now, just to give you a little bit of an outlook, because of course at Hype, we're also very conscious of this issue to innovate beyond your organization. And of course you can do that already with campaigns and channels and things like that. But we also have the partnering module. And just to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into what's coming up, is we are currently working on including ESG criteria in the Hype partnering module. And what that would mean is that you could ask your partners on an annual basis, for example, to fill in your ESG criteria. And that is going to be something where we provide you with a suggestion, just, you know, a bunch of like a template, a bunch of questions that you can ask, but you can also modify that. So you could also add your own questions. You can take some of our questions, suggested best practice questions out, and you can send that to your partners that you have gathered in Hype Partnering. And then you will also get an overview of like what does your network look like, right? How many of your partners receive like a very high ESG score? So like we see here, then there's like these 3 different categories, and then you can go into like subcategories within environment, social, or governance to take a closer look at something. That is also going to help you if you say, okay, we are innovating for a new product. We want to work with a partner who's already super sustainable in the social area or in the environmental or in general. And so you could filter through your partners, find the right people, and then innovate with them. Or you could help your partners become more innovative by setting goals and targets for them, by helping them to do that. And so this is something where you just gain a lot more transparency of what is happening across your value chain. And then you can start collaborating with them. So it's coming up. It's not included in the software yet, but it is something that we're currently working on. Now, we took a look at inside organizational innovation for sustainability, also beyond the organization. Now, what does that mean? We have to make decisions. We gather all these different ideas, and now we have to make decisions. Now, back in the day, that used to be super easy, okay? So we had business that was super important, and it was very separated from environment and society. Now that kind of like over the years grew more together. And so right now we have this model here that you can see on the right-hand side, which is people, planet, and profit or prosperity if you're a country, but also person, the individual person who plays a part in it in the middle. Because the motivation of an individual person can play a huge role. If a CEO decides that this is something that is essential, that makes a huge impact on the entire organization, for example. So we're in this model now where like all of these areas are so connected and cannot be differentiated anymore, and they are all influencing each other. So a good example for that is COVID. You know, with COVID, we see that changes were made in the environment. So you know, a virus got to a host, us as humankind, that it was not supposed to go to, which had a huge impact on societies, which had a huge impact on businesses because societies were not working that well anymore. And then that business has a huge impact on the individual person. But the individual person then also has a huge impact on the society because of, you know, spreading the virus and things like that. So that's how like that all kind of works together. And that's what raises the complexity. So essentially, before we said, okay, does this idea bring me money? Okay, yes or no. But now we have to take into consideration, how do our actions, if we implement this idea, what kind of an impact does that have or could it have on the environment? What kind of materials am I using? How am I recycling? What's my end of life process? You know, what is that doing with the people, the community that we're serving? How does that all work? So it's become a lot more that we have to take care of. And a good example for that is AkzoNobel, for example. So AkzoNobel, they produce paint. So their kind of mantra is people, planet, paint. And paint means innovation, but it also means innovating sustainably. So you can see here on the right-hand side, like some of their goals, and on the bottom left, the core SDGs that they have decided to contribute to. And so AkzoNobel run a huge challenge or a huge program that is called Paint the Future, which is an open innovation program. And so they apply the people, planet, paint perspective to all of their internal innovation, yes, but they also apply it to all of their external innovation, so their open innovation. So this is a screenshot directly from their site, where this is part of their supplier program. So what they say as innovation drivers, even for their supplier program, is productivity, yes, of course, asset protection, surface enhancement, yeah, but also environmental protection, which is a core part of it. And this is not a sustainability campaign that is run. It's not a sustainability program that is run. This is a supplier program that is run, and one of the core innovation drivers for them is already the environmental protection. So this is the one where we want to preserve the planet, you know, where we want to go beyond our own generation, where we want to have circular economy, which is a huge deal for them, and they're constantly innovating towards that. And so that is something, you know, we want to offer our customers competitive and sustainable solutions without harmful substances. And so that's kind of like how they pull all of that together. So what I really want to emphasize here is that these organizations that are already very mature when it comes to connecting sustainability and innovation do not differentiate anymore when it comes to decision making. Sustainability measurements, sustainability decision criteria are automatically and always included with innovation criteria, because all ideas have to go through that assessment. And I know that there's many of you who are also doing that in this way, but let me just ask you, since I already have you right here, are ESG criteria currently included in your normal, your regular innovation decision-making process? Okay, so we still have some answers coming in. Thank you really for working with me. I hope that this interaction also kind of makes it a little bit more interesting. Okay, so last chance for you to click. Great. All right, let me show you the results. So 58% of you are saying yes, so that's more than half, which is great. 32% are saying no, which is, again, something that I expected. And then 11% of you don't know, and that is completely valid. Sometimes it's really difficult to make sure, like, how does this criterion respond to innovation or sustainability, because we don't really separate it anymore. Perfect, thank you so much. So now let's move on to the next aspect. How do you implement sustainability, right? How do you implement that in innovation? This is one of our clients in Saudi Arabia, Al-Dabakh Group. They're a conglomerate. They have 10 different, what they call sister companies, all doing different things, okay? So we have, you know, oil, raising chickens, IT, time-sharing employees, etc. So very, very different businesses that all report then into the same investor, which is the Al-Dabakh Group. Now, they have still chosen, even across all of these 10 businesses, they have chosen core SDGs that they are contributing to. They have mapped them with ESG, just in general, the way that you can see here on the left-hand side. Now, every activity is connected to specific SDGs that they have defined. And there's a whole management behind it, okay? So you have a board of directors, you have the chairman of the entire group, and you also have a group CEO. And the group CEO hosts the Sustainability Council. And in the Sustainability Council, you have a CSO from each of those different sister companies, and they come together every Monday, every week, to discuss all of these different aspects. So as the CSO of one of these companies, of course, you want to think about, how can I raise my chickens more sustainably, right? But what they're doing with the Sustainability Council, and also with campaigns that they're running and how they're interacting across all the 10,000 employees across the entire Al-Dabakh Group, is they come together and they see, how can we work with each other? So it's almost like an kind of like open innovation program in a limited audience, because it's 10 companies working with each other on sustainability issues. So for example, last year, we ran a green logistics campaign with them. And so the different employees of the different companies could all interact with each other so that they could optimize logistics, so supply chains, even between the different companies. So not just for one of them, but even across all of these different companies. So that's kind of like how they are managing. And just to give you one specific example from one of their groups. So this is Tenmia. Tenmia, they raise chickens. And what they do, it's currently still ongoing, is the 1 million tree initiative. So what you have to imagine is that a lot of Saudi Arabia is plain desert, okay? So those are, of course, not very good conditions for communities, for the environment. And so that's why also there is a huge Saudi initiative, Vision 2030, which includes a ton of sustainability efforts in there. And Tenmia is contributing to that. So what they are doing is they raise chickens, slaughter them, sell them. That's their core business. But what they saw is that they always kept importing food for those chickens because it doesn't grow in Saudi Arabia because there's so much desert, which costs them a lot of money, of course, and causes CO2 emissions. So what they do now, in line with that Vision 2030 of the country, is they are planting trees, okay? And you can see that here. So every year they are planting trees to get to the target of 1 million trees. And you can see that. So I was there earlier this year, and around Riyadh, which is the capital of Saudi Arabia, there's like a lot of trees planted. So you can already see these efforts, coming to life. And basically it protects cities, it protects the region, it protects the soil. They use the wastewater from the chickens and also the solid waste to fertilize these trees, to grow these trees. And then they shave the trees and generate food for the chickens from that. So basically then it goes into this virtual cycle, right? So that's the one that you can see here. So they grow the trees, so they reduce CO2 emissions by growing the trees, but also because now they don't have to import the food anymore. That also, so it reduces CO2 emissions twice. They green the desert, which is good for the entire country and environment. They use those wood shaves for the poultry farms, for the slaughterhouses, which produce the wastewater, which then go back into the trees. So they have this circular economy that is going on there. And what's not on this, but I'm just going to quickly tell you about that, is that they then also connect it to a social initiative. So every 4 chickens that are being sold, they donate a 5th chicken to the community, so to a family in need. And so that is how they also connect that to social initiatives. So that's kind of like what I'm talking about here when we say sustainable innovation. It reduces their costs, it really helps them, but it has a great environmental impact and a great social impact when we take a look at this project, and it contributes to all the SDGs that you can see here on the page. Now, when we implement sustainable innovation or innovation in general, we need to know, what do we have in our pipeline? Like, how can we do that? And just to give you a software example again from our side, Hype Projects offers this portfolio analyzer where you can have all of your different milestones and steps in here, where you can include all the different project teams, but where you can also make your decisions, okay? So where you can see, where am I at? What could I do? What kind of an impact could that have? Which choices do I want to make? And if you don't want to include that in your software, you can also export it all to Power BI, which is what a lot of our clients are doing, and make decisions in a place where you always make decisions, right? Where you just kind of pull that in. So just a quick shout out to that. We do have also software that supports you when you go ahead and you implement your sustainable innovation. Now, to wrap it up, this is what we took a look at in the very beginning, the transformation challenge and all of these different aspects that we need to do here. And just so you are kind of aware of also what we can do, what Hype can do to support you with that, is going with these different challenges, and very specifically being developed for that also, are these different modules that we offer. So in Hype Strategy, we help identify new technologies, right? So you can have your Trend One, you can have your Mapagee integration. So you can pull that in, you can form these topic clusters and use those to understand your trends, your industry, etc. You can set your sustainability roadmap, like I was showing you in the beginning. So all of these different aspects work in here with your key, your strategic innovation areas that you will then use to ideate for them, right? So that is where you can pull in all the stakeholders that you need, internal, external, include all of them, address your inclusiveness, diversity, all of these different aspects, all that also contribute to the social side of sustainability. Then you will be able to make your decisions. You can see, okay, where do we have to compromise a little? Where do we have to compensate using evaluation to do that? And then we can say, okay, I want to take this beyond everything else. I want to be able to track more, to see more, to do all these different things. I want to be able to identify new partners. So that's where Hype Partnering comes into play. So you can really see, okay, who has a good sustainability offering, right? And where do I have my new partners? But also, the partners that I already have, how do they score against ESG criteria? Like, what is happening there? And who can help me with my sustainability efforts? How can we collaborate and innovate together? But also, how can you innovate with them, right? So it goes kind of in both directions. It's not a problem where it's just like, oh, you help me, but it's also you helping them potentially to come to a better solution together. And then, of course, implementing everything. So Hype Projects really helps you create workflows where you can say, okay, this is a great idea, but we need to do a business model canvas. We need to investigate further. We need to do a market study. We need to, whatever it might be, to bridge that gap between we have an idea and it's evaluated, and we're in a full-on project management office project that they are doing. So you can track your concepts and within your business case. So not just in your ideas, you can still make your decisions and say, okay, now we've investigated this a little bit further. Before we invest, let's see how this lines up, and let's see with, for example, the portfolio analyzer, which decisions we want to make here. So just so you have a quick overview of how we could also partner up with you to help you achieve your sustainability and innovation goals. And then just as a quick summary, innovation and sustainability are growing so closely together, and at a certain point I think that we will not be able to differentiate them anymore. So what do you need to do to be successful at that? Really think about sustainability as an opportunity, not as a burden, not something that just needs to be done. Oh, we have this regulation, it's just costing us money. Think about a new opportunity. Think about how that can be a business catalyst. Think about how you can differentiate from your competition, how you can be ahead of the game, right? Work with all your stakeholders. So don't limit your audience. Don't just speak with like the 5 people who are doing your CSR reporting. No, reach out to all your employees and the clients that I've supported with sustainability initiatives. It's such a boost for employees. They are so happy about it. They really want to contribute. Those are some of the most successful initiatives that I've seen in innovation. So, and then take it beyond that, you know, do like AkzoNobel or like Fujitsu are doing. See what skill sets are out there, bring them back into your innovation capability. Don't play Pokemon, okay? Don't catch them all, but really think about what is my core business? Where do I have the biggest impact on this world, on my community? And what can I do to change that? And then pick the ones that are actually the most relevant for your business. Think about, all of us are trained to always think about money, okay? So sometimes employees tell me like, oh, but I don't have the right to innovate for sustainability. Nobody cares about that. Excuse me. So make really sure that people know this is something we want, this is something strategic, this is something where we're going, and yes, this also makes money for us. And then my experience has been that sustainability works best if it's included in KPIs, okay? So ideally, it's included in a management's bonus structure. Sometimes that's not possible, but everything that we can measure and ideally tie money to tends to work better. So if that hasn't happened yet, not sure how much influence you have over that, but that is something that I'm really seeing. If management has sustainability goals, a lot more moves in that direction. All right, well, thank you guys so much for listening, and especially for being so interactive with me here today. And now I would like to open up for any questions that you might still have.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sandra. I think that was a very compelling presentation. I already got 3 questions. Everybody else, please use the control panel to submit your questions. The first one is relating to one of your very early slides. And the question is, how is it that more developed countries need more earths? Is that because more people live there? I think it's related to the resources we consume. Is that right?
Yeah. No, it's not related to more people, because we see that Africa has only, I think, about 4% of carbon emissions, whereas Europe, who really doesn't have as many people, has way more. So what we see is that the more money people have, often, the more their mobility, for example, increases. So somebody who has money to go on a flight from, you know, Berlin to New York will do that. Somebody who doesn't have the money will not do that. So oftentimes, unfortunately, even within developed countries, we see that it's a money issue. We see that people who have more money also kind of want to explore more, have more opportunity, buy more things, so have bigger houses, so need more space for fewer people. move around more. So you have flights and travel and all of these different things. And that's also true for organizations.
Thank you. The next question is, what will happen if we don't reach the SDGs till 2030?
Yeah, good question. Are you trying to pull out my pessimistic side? Well, nothing in the sense of the world is not collapsing from one day to another. But of course, we do see that there are certain limits. For example, the 1.5 Celsius degree goal is if we miss that, then there are some changes that are going to happen in the world that might not be reversible, or like all scientific research is pointing to that that's not going to be reversible. So for example, even if we just get over the 1.5 degree target just a little bit and then go back, there's still some changes that are going to be irreversible. And that doesn't mean that planet is not going to exist anymore. It really has the biggest impact on us as a human species. So it's not like the planet is not going to exist. The world can be completely on fire, the planet's going to survive, and some species and plants and everything are going to survive, but we might not, or we might not as numerously. Let's put it that way. So like sea levels rising, deserts expanding, so we will not have as much livable space. So we will also see that in like the global north, because we are going to get so many more refugees because they can't live in their own countries anymore. So it is going to have a huge impact, not just in those countries where you have an ocean or something coming up, but also socially speaking in other countries. And the global north, Europe, US is going to see a lot of social impact on that.
Right, and I think this is a connected question basically, because people who do have more money, like us in Europe, compared to other areas of the world, also have more money to spend on sustainable products, right? I mean, that must have an impact.
It does. And we also see that oftentimes, so for example, with organic food, a lot of people buy it when they have a certain amount of money, and then that makes a big difference. It's just that like humans tend to still spend. So oftentimes what is best is not to buy the sustainable product, but to buy no product, to reuse and recycle and to reduce all of these different things. So it's really great, for example, to go on a flight and then compensate for your CO2 emissions. But that compensation is only going to come into play in the next 10 to 20 years, for example, if you decide to plant trees. So it's still harmful. So you do spend money on it, yes, but unfortunately money is not the only answer to this problem. So the way that we would have to do it if we don't look at technology is to really reduce everything that we are doing. But of course, that is something that is really difficult to do. And we have kind of like the individual motivation that goes against that, because all of us want to have the exact same opportunities and freedom and everything to do, but within the boundaries of the planet. And we do need technology to do that, but also other measurements long-term, such as educating girls, giving them access to birth control, stuff like that, to reduce population, because if we don't have as many people, we tend to not have as much CO2, as an example, very in a nutshell.
Thank you. So to wrap this up, we have a couple of more questions regarding follow-ups, like what was the outcome of the Velo campaign? Can we have the slides? And I'll send around all of this, like including a video, an interview with Sven Grave from Velo in the follow-up email. I'll send a link to the slides, a link to the recording, so you'll have it all. Don't worry. And I think that's it. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us today, and hope to see you soon in face-to-face.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Bye.